Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Tablas Creek Instagram Live semi-weekly broadcast. I am, as always, Jason Haas. I am super excited for this week's guest. It is Annette Alvarez-Peters, who was for 37 years at Costco and worked her way up to being the most powerful wine buyer in the country. And she retired a couple of years ago and is now doing all kinds of cool stuff. So she's one of the most dynamic people I know in the world of wine. I can't wait to talk to her. But as I normally do, while we're waiting for people to join, I am going to show you a few pictures and give you a little sense of what's going on here at the vineyard. So for us, the things are growing fast. It is super vibrant and green out there. You can see the bushiness of the vines. This is a Grenache block. We are starting to see little berries. This is in the Viognier. We even have some Grenache berries that are a little bigger than that. Let me see. I took so many pictures this morning that I think I'm losing some of them. So, yeah, you can see in there. You can also see that we are seeing a little bit of shatter. That's one of the things you worry about when you have cold weather during flowering. It's particularly an issue in Grenache. Or it's particularly prone to Grenache, but it's not as big an issue in Grenache because Grenache normally sets such a heavy crop that you'd need to drop some of it anyway. So a little bit of shatter in Grenache isn't a terrible thing. We don't seem to be seeing it in anything else, so that's good. We are seeing some of the new blocks that we planted looking really good. This is a new Mourvedre vine that we planted in what we call the Santos block, named after our longtime assistant nursery manager and crew member, Santos Espinoza. We planted that last year. Those vines look amazing. I have one more picture of that to show you. And these new vines looking really good. So that's super encouraging. On a slightly less encouraging note, we are still seeing some results of the frost damage, even in blocks that were not super badly affected. Like this is a Grenache block up at the top of a hill, not an area that we normally see big issues with frost or any issues with frost. But that big freeze that we saw on May 10th hit in places we don't normally see. So this doesn't look like it's anything particularly devastating up here, but I wrote on the blog a couple of weeks ago, we are going to see some impact on some of our lower lying blocks, particularly with Roussanne. Okay, one more picture, just because I love it. I got this great picture of an old Syrah vine that I think is just kind of majestic. So this is one of the original Syrah vines that we planted back in 1992, and it's still going strong. You can see how vigorous and exuberant it is. Those canes are already taller than I am. And it looks like it's poised for a great season. Okay, I am going to stop sharing, and then I'm going to invite Annette to join. I see. Hopefully, she will be with us momentarily.
Good, how are you?
Hey, how are you, Annette?
Great.
I'm doing great. Doing great. It is a time of year when things change fast. I go out to the vineyard and I'm like, those berries didn't used to be there. Those vines are twice as bushy as they were last week.
And I have my lunch wine. As you were talking about Grenache. Yeah.
Oh, that's wonderful. Cool. Well, I gave people a really quick introduction into a little bit of your background when we first started. I don't know if you were already watching then, but I would love to start just by asking you to share a little bit of your path into wine. Did you grow up around wine? Was wine on your parents' table as you were growing up, or was it something you came to a little bit
unfortunately,
later?
there wasn't any wine on our table growing up. It did come a little bit later in life. Probably in high school when everyone's experimenting with alcohol. Not that I'm saying that's a great thing, but that was true. I got into the business in 1995. I had been a buyer for Costco, an electronics buyer, and I moved back and forth from California to Washington State, back to California. There was the alcohol beverage category open for a buyer position. So I applied for that. I was able to get that because of my experience being a buyer. However, I didn't know anything about the category. I do recall telling my boss, I promise you I will figure this out. And that the category was beer, wine, spirits. And
was that, and did you make that move because beer, wines, and spirits was like a step up professionally from buying in the electronics world, or was it something that you chose because you were like, oh man, I want to be involved in beer, wine, and spirits because beer, wine, and spirits are cool?
As much as I'd like to think that, no, I moved down to California for a guy. And today it's a great story because we're still married. But yeah, so I it was, by default, I got the position because I knew how to purchase for Costco. And then I just started going out, asking questions to everybody. And it was why this, why that? And, it was a lot of fun. I didn't know a lot. And that really means I didn't know anything. I just remember a couple bottles being on the table when we'd go out to dinner. And that was pretty much the extent of my knowledge. And I asked questions to, suppliers, wholesalers, my friends that collected wine. What should we be purchasing? How should we be doing this? I didn't know, but I ended up studying for about a 6-year period through the WCT, Wine and Spirits Education Trust, and also the Wine Society, the Society of Wine Educators. So I got all my accreditations through that. And
do you have a wine that you remember as sort of like an aha wine? It was the first time that you tasted when you were like, oh, now I get it.
Probably a couple of times. I would probably have to say when I was purchasing in the 1995 vintage of Bordeaux, and we were purchasing on futures, and that was the first time the company had purchased on futures. And I recall having some Du Cru Bucaillou, and I thought, whoa, this is outstanding. So I'd probably say that, and then also Dom Perignon on my birthday. It was, I believe it was at 85. And I thought, wow, this is champagne. This is lovely.
Because you must have, the amount that you must have had to learn so fast must have been amazing. Because I think we first met in like the mid 2000s, and I felt like you must have been doing this already. You seemed so confident in what you were doing and so secure in what you were doing. Like I just assumed you'd been doing it for decades. But you had only been doing it for like 10 years at that point.
No, and at the time when I started in the department, it was Costco was a mid-size wine retailer, and I did my fair share of groveling to suppliers, begging them to sell Costco. A lot of suppliers didn't know who Costco was. Why would I sell you? Oh my God, you'd take all my inventory. And so it took a while to develop and trying to figure out, what was in the mind of a supplier and what were their hesitation to sell Costco, and really trying to figure out, okay, what's my game plan going into this winery or that winery? So, yeah, that was hard, pounding the pavement.
Which is sort of amazing, because you normally think of things like it's usually from the other side. It's usually the suppliers who are having to pound the pavement to try to convince the accounts, particularly an account with the reach and the muscle and the profile of Costco. So what was your elevator pitch to wineries as to why they should sell from Costco?
I had a lot. It was really trying to figure out why they didn't want to sell Costco and what was that hesitation. A lot of it was margin. And when it was a margin situation, there wasn't really much I could do. There wasn't any amount of convincing because Costco has very stringent margins. If it was you were going to upset my wine club members, the pitch was, well, then only sell me part of the time, not all year long. So it becomes this in and out treasure hunt type of experience for consumers, how they would, oh, look what's here today, or sell me the last vintage. Maybe they held back a few thousand cases of their last vintage as they transitioned to the new vintage. You know, if Costco had it, then it was the previous vintage. And yeah, as a supplier, go get it because that's the only place you're going to find it. So it was really trying to figure out, okay, you know, how do I play this game with everybody and try to get them to sell me? But it was always fun. It was always a challenge. I recall always going to the Wine Spectator wine events and asking, and fully knowing they were going to say no, but every year I'd go up to that booth, give them my card and say, is this the year? And sometimes it was, and sometimes it wasn't.
And it's interesting to hear you describe Costco at the stage where you started as a mid-size outlet. It was clearly not a mid-size outlet by the time you were done with the program.
You know how they always say, try to leave the department better than you found it. I think I did that.
I would say so. And am I right that at the time, like sort of over your tenure, I mean, Costco became the largest retailer at just about every price point, right? I mean, it was the largest retailer for very expensive wines, for mid-priced wines, for wines at the entry-level prices. It was, I think people sometimes maybe thought that this was a place where you would go to buy cheap wine, but it was not. You go into a Costco, there is an incredible selection of wine.
Indeed. You know, were we the largest? It was really hard to pinpoint that because not all retailers would report numbers. I think that really came back through the wholesalers and them touting that. I couldn't say 100%. Could I say there was, you know, were we in the top three? Probably, most likely. You know, Safeway does a great job. Kroger does a great job. There's Total Wine. Everybody does a really great job, but all those numbers weren't out there. So it was really difficult to. That being said, did we move a lot of cases? Oh, hell yeah.
So what was sort of your, what were the things that you really felt like you were advocating for within that? I mean, I'm sure there were things that, that you started that hadn't been done before in that Costco world, but what were the things that you look back at and say, okay, yeah, that was something that I thought was really going to be great, and it was?
Probably purchasing Bordeaux futures and really getting behind that, and not knowing what I was doing in the beginning and trusting the wholesaler. I remember saying, this better sell because I am putting my neck on the line. But then, you know, towards the end, it was really about, I remember my last trip to Bordeaux, actually Bruno from Ducru Bucaillou had said to me, you know, thank you very much, Annette, for all of the business throughout the years. You know, you had a crew come to Bordeaux every year, even if it was a bad year. And not only that, you didn't just get wine into the mouths of consumers on the left and the right coast, but throughout middle America, because there's Costco's everywhere. And we were able to help them, you know, celebrate everything that they've done throughout the years. And with that, we were able to garner a fairly good size of allocation.
Yeah, yes, I'm sure you were. So I know you and I were at Castel at the same time once, probably a decade ago. Were there winery regions that you particularly remember, like that were particularly noteworthy to visit? I still
remember that steak that Laurent made us that had the garlic and the olives when we were there. Oh my gosh, you know, really fond of Rhone. Champagne was just a wow. Spain, Loire. So excited to be there. And of course, up and down, the domestic wineries, my first time in Napa and Sonoma and Washington State. And when I moved to Washington State, thinking, wow, I've always been such a huge, huge fan of California. How come people don't know about Washington? And how do you get that word out that these wines are amazing? And, it's one of those things. Wine's really hard because there's so many producers from so many regions, and you're not ever going to know every single producer. But how do you introduce new people to categories that they're not familiar with? We need a lot of people pushing that envelope forward. And how do we do that? We have to bring a lot of people up through the system that I think that are experimenting with wines and saying, hey, this is the best thing ever. And really getting behind, different grape varieties. I think you guys do a fabulous job. It's not classics. So, what is a Grenache and how do you explain that to someone and how do you get them to love it? Industry.
I hope this isn't on my end. We got it sorry, we just lost you for a quick second. I hope it wasn't on my end, but it's certainly possible that it was, given that we are way out in the sticks. Cool. So when you started the process of wrapping your head around a new region, like Washington State or any place that you were trying to introduce to to your audience at Costco, how did you go about that? What was the system that you used to wrap your own head around a place that maybe you didn't know that well yet? Uh-oh, we have another. Okay, looks like Annette crashed out. There was a connection issue. Okay, I am going to see if she joins again. I'm going to invite her to join. Hopefully that will.
Sorry. There you are.
Hey, I see you again.
Yeah, so joining.
Excellent. Okay.
So getting people to experiment with things. With Costco, it's we always said you had a 5x5 rule. You have 5 seconds and 5 feet away to attract somebody. And I think a lot of people through Costco are running around trying to pick up whatever they need. So they don't have a lot of time. But what is going to attract them? A lot of times it's the signage and the description of the wine. I remember watching members pick up wine and put it down or put it in their basket and then take it out and kind of wondering why did they do that? So I remember reading the sign and it had descriptors of tar and roses. And I'm like, I bet that's why they put it back because all of a sudden tar didn't sound so appealing. But just the sheer amount of members that walk through a Costco door, you have so many eyeballs, in a second, or not in a second, excuse me, over a weekend if something's going to sell. And they were either going to pick it up or they're not going to pick it up. So there was a lot of testing going on to kind of figure out, what should we be putting out there? What's trending today? Let's just try it. I tried it at a trade tasting. I think it's fabulous. Let's just put it out there, see if it can sell.
And how did you go about wrapping your own head around, say, a new region or a new variety and deciding what would make sense to at least start on the floor? I'm thinking of you moving up to Washington and saying, why are there not more Washington wines in these sets? How did you go about launching yourself into these new categories?
What's great I think about Costco is they have regional buyers and everyone has the autonomy to purchase whatever they see fit for their clientele in their particular regions. During the meetings we would talk about, hey, who's selling whatever and what's cool out there, what have you tasted, what are people looking for? So there was a group of 10 people making decisions for the company saying, yeah, this is fabulous, we should try it. The other thing is they have access to everybody's sales to see what's selling, what's hot. You know, should we try it now? Are we too premature? Do I hop on that bandwagon now? So it was really a lot about testing and just putting it out there. And is that something that's trending in that particular market? Maybe a little too premature for another market. But that's pretty much, you just test with, you know, when there's 2,500 to 5,000 people walking through every Costco every day, that's a lot of people. That's a lot of people.
That's a lot of market research opportunities that you have
Yes,
at every
yes.
store every day. Cool. Okay, so let's transition a little bit into some of the
Sure.
things that you're working on now. So I know one of the big projects that you're involved, you're on the advisory board with is Wine Unify. Can you tell people a little bit about that, a little bit about the mission and
Yeah, so
and how you got involved?
you know, I'm really proud to be part of that and part of that group. This was developed right after George Floyd, and it was trying to create a platform to champion, you know, diversity and inclusion with minorities in the wine business. So it was Martin Reyes and Mary Margaret McCamick, both of them, Master of Wine, and also Sam DeLynn Proctor came up with this foundation to move forward. Then they started tapping industry people. Hey, can you help? It's all volunteer. So Martin tapped me and said, hey, do you think you could do it? Yeah, sure, I would love to. You know, there's a bunch of OG hospitality, you know, Tonya Pitts in San Francisco, Gary Blosiacion, Alicia Towns Franken, and, you know, there's Priyanka French, winemaker at Sigala. So a great group of people that are trying to push it forward. How do we get people in the industry that look like us, that, you know, we can create a safe space for them to belong, to do things differently, to share their ideas. You know, so we give out scholarships. There's the Welcome, which is the WSET level 1, and they get group mentorship from all of us. And then there's the Elevate Awards, which are the level 2, and they get one-on-one mentorship. We have great sponsors. You know, there's wine from wine.com, Coravan. Vineyard Brands is a big sponsor of Wine Unify, which is fantastic. And then there's Amplify, which is more mentorship, and the level 3 WSET. So I think it's just so fabulous. They have already given out over 70 scholarship awards, which I think is fantastic. How do you get mentees and help them? You know, I've had my share of mentees that I just love, whether that's sharing my network, whether it's helping them with their career pivots, whether it's working how to talk to their boss, how to interview. So a lot of different things I think that are very important, especially for a younger generation, and how do you navigate this crazy industry that we're all in. So I just...
Did you have mentors who particularly helped you along this path? Are there ones, like when you are mentoring newer people in the industry, do you have examples that you look to?
Well, being a boomer, I have a lot of experience. So with, you know, almost 30 years in the industry, I've seen a lot, done a lot. But yeah, you know, I obviously had a lot of people that I looked up to. You know, a lot of them are, hey, do you know so-and-so? I'm like, I know their dad. I know their mom. You know, because that's how I came up the industry. So I love to see how that next generation, everyone that I dealt with, and seeing their kids come up through the industry. But yeah, I think for me, sharing my experience, sharing my knowledge, any way that I can, I just, you know, I find so much excitement in it.
So if anybody is watching this and they want to learn more about Wine Unify, what's the best way for them to do it?
I think it's wineunify.com. I should
But
Google.
whatever. It's Googleable, I'm sure.
It's so great.
That's not it. Cool. Okay. Awesome. I think that's so critical because I think one of the criticisms of the world of wine, which I think is an absolutely legitimate criticism, is that it doesn't look like America terribly well. It tends to be whiter. It tends to be older, and that's something which is for sure holding back the broader wine industry. It needs to look more like America looks if it's going to be successful going forwards. And I think having opportunities for people to have access to veterans like you who have done all of this, and can then see themselves in these roles. It's such a critical piece, and it's a piece that I think has been missing for
right?
a long time.
When do you think about wine? And unless it's in your family, you don't think about it when you're in high school saying, I want to be in the wine business. Well, like college, I want to be a, industry sales rep. That doesn't cross your mind. But as people start to see people who look like them say, hey, maybe that is something. I never even thought of that. You look at how many people go to college and never use their degree because, what have you, whatever life throws at you. But I think that we have to be more inclusive. We have to be able to, look at that diversity and have those voices. Every company should, right? I think it makes a better company. And, it's gender, it's race, it's sexual orientation, all that differ. They can add so much to anybody's business. And I'm a firm believer of that because they have different voices. They have different ways of looking at things. So we need to listen to them. And how do we bring them on? Yeah, it's a great mission that I'm Absolutely. Happy to be a part of.
Cool. Excellent. Okay, so are there like wines that you feel like are still too under the radar? Are there things that you look at and you're like, man, that is going to be huge, or that deserves to be huge, even if it's not there yet? Or what would you turn people onto that they maybe don't already think they know?
Actually, what I think is really fascinating is what's going to happen. What's going to happen in a few years as the climate is changing on us. And Bordeaux, for instance, it's getting so warm over there, and they are regulated to what they can grow. Are the laws going to change where they start bringing in some Rhone varieties? And same with California. Where are you going to grow your Cabernet grapes? If it's getting too hot in certain areas, are you going to cooler areas? I just think that's going to be super fascinating, moving forward, and how wineries are going to really have to strategically figure out, where do I need to plant and how long is that going to take me, and can I get there? So I think that's going to fly under the radar as to how are we going to figure out what we're going to make in the future. Because everyone's projecting out, 5, 10, 15 years. What does it look like? And, Mother Nature hasn't been kind to so many people in the last few years, right? And I don't see it getting any better. I think there's going to be more and more challenges for everybody.
Yeah, I mean, that's the classic thing that like the hottest year of the last 30 years is going to be the coolest year of the next 30 years. Like, I mean, it's and given that grapevines hopefully are going to live like a human lifespan when you plant them, you'd better be thinking as to what the climate is going to be like when they're mature, because it's not like planting tomatoes. You don't have a different shot every year. You're hoping to plant something and have that be the right thing for one generation, 2 generations, 3 generations forward.
So I wish you luck on that.
Yeah. No, I think there's when you talk to grape growers and winemakers, they're thinking about this, but I think the general wine consuming public is not really thinking about this yet. They sort of think of these wine regions as being immutable, in that, like, yes, of course, Bordeaux is the place where you grow Cabernet. Yes, of course, Burgundy is the place you grow Pinot Noir. Yes, of course, sparkling wine happens in Champagne. And it's, those borders and those definitions and those associations that places have with specific grapes are they're already breaking down to a certain extent, and I think that's going to become more pronounced for sure.
100%. And I also think things that are flying under the radar that are really important to people. You know, we talked a lot about diversity and how do people start to support women, you know, women winemakers, women owners, or, you know, any of the, you know, Asians in wine or Hispanics or African Americans. And I think a lot of people are seeking out, what are these guys doing? And let's try to support them. So I think that there's a lot of rallying around them. And I just think that's fabulous, right? Because they're not going to be your tried and true brands right now, but they will be one day. But we just need to get them in front of the, you know, the majority of the public out there and say, hey, these are fabulous too.
Absolutely. Okay. One last question. So if you had to put your crystal ball in front of you and point to a couple of things that you think are for sure going to be different in another 20 years, what would they be?
Going to be different? Well, I hope a lot more people are drinking wine. I hope that there's a lot more diversity in the wine world, and that it becomes no longer a focus, and it's what we do because it's the right thing to do.
Yep. I hope so much that you are right. And I do feel like things are moving in the right direction after a lot of years where things maybe didn't move much. But that would be that's something to aspire to.
It's all about baby steps. We've come a long way, but we have a long way to go.
Yep. So that is truth. Cool. Okay. So if people want to learn more about what you're working on or what you're doing, what's the best way for them to do that?
So, you know, when I was in the corporate world, I always had an admin to do things. I am that again. But, you know, I'm on Instagram. I'm less on Facebook, but more on Instagram. Follow me at Annette, you know, and where you can, I'm doing these days.
So cool. Awesome. Well, Annette, thank you so much for taking a little time out of your Wednesday to join and talk. Thank you for all of the great work that you're doing now. And thank you for the years of support of Tablas Creek.
Yeah, thank you. It was great talking to you. I can't wait to come back and see you guys again. All right.
Excellent. We'd love to see you anytime. Cool. Okay. Thank you. Bye, Annette. Thank you, everybody who joined us. I will see you again in 2 weeks. Meanwhile, if you are in California, I hope you're staying cool. And if you're elsewhere, I hope summer is reaching you. So again, thank you for being here, and I will see you all in 2 weeks.